The Quick and the Dead Publishing presents the Thucydides Galactic Imperial Military High School Detective and Mystery Club with a Space Dog. Written by Jamin Edward Bissett. Edited by Jenna D. Clark. Read by the author. All About Author section and acknowledgments have been moved to the end of the audiobook version. You're welcome. Prologue. Matter, Form, and Power. There was very little new to smell for the past few days, till the introduction of two unfamiliar scents was something worth noting. With snaws lifted into the air and gently sniffing out the new discovery, a most noble of earth beast moved to the front of his cage. His majestic brown, black, and white fur was barely able to contain his raw animal physique as he peeked out from between the laser grating that made up his door. This wonderful creature had once been overwhelmed with new sights, sounds, and smells when he was first brought to the lab a few months prior, but now all of the school's chemistry equipment, various unique alien species of the faculty, and their questionable choices in food for their sack lunches had all become old hat. Even old hats were now a familiar scent that our furry friend was more than used to. However, now was the opportunity for new sensations. The prospect was intriguing. After all, who doesn't like to try new things every now and then? Change is great. Well, most change. I guess pennies are actually the worst and are only really useful as sacrifices to children's equally worthless piggy banks. However, low utility coinage aside, something unexpected and new is usually a welcomed opportunity. The first smell was that of a person. Of that our fuzzy prologue protagonist was quite certain, but it didn't give off the same sense as the other faculty members. He had smelled Nippons, Hangouks, Zongos, chimpanzees, and mustached puffbirds, but this was distinctly different from all of those. Okay, maybe those last two were not faculty members, but with the way science is progressing these days, they could have been teaching assistants. No, this new aroma was not alone, as two more concoctions of smells, one familiar and one altogether new, filled the beast's nostrils. While familiar can also be a good thing, in this instance the overwhelming pungency of the new scent made thinking of anything else quite difficult. It smelt of deceitful sweetness, a kind of bitterness hidden from a first sniff, not too dissimilar from putting on body spray instead of taking a shower before school. You filthy animal. And this is coming from an actually filthy animal. However, this scent was not animal in nature. It was chemical, sterile, and clinical in its purity, and stark in its purpose. This was made for something, but what that was could not be determined. I mean, this is a highly intelligent, genetically engineered space dog, but he is no scientist. Oh yeah, the point of view for this chapter is a dog. I thought the name of the book gave it away already. I think you're missing the big picture here. Whatever he is smelling, it's up to no good. The space dog tried his hardest to contort his neck and get some kind of visual confirmation to go along with his olfactory ones, but no such luck. Despite the open setup of the laboratory, with no walls or doors to obscure things, he was unable to successfully turn his head to the right. It would only be a few hours later that he realized it was because he was standing on his own long floppy ear. Okay, maybe the highly intelligent part was a bit of an exaggeration, but the genetically engineered dog part is true for sure. The whole school had been in a flurry of activity for the past few weeks, getting ready for the grand reopening of the newly renovated military academy, so late-night meetings were not an uncommon occurrence. But something about this combination of mysterious bittersweet smells and hushed tones made the canine feel uneasy. Nothing good comes from late-night rendezvous in a school laboratory, he reasoned to himself. I have no idea where he learned the word rendezvous from, but he was right. Kids, good things rarely happen at a school laboratory during the day, so I'm pretty sure you want to stay away from them late at night. Unless that bittersweet smell is dark chocolate cookies. Doubtful, but possible. Regardless, he would not have too much time to ponder what kind of crazy schemes were being cooked up by shifty shapes in the dead of night in the military school laboratory, because it was only 2 more days until the start of the school year. That meant he would finally be finding a loving home with a group of freshmen. I wonder what they'll be like, he thought to himself. No doubt ladies and gentlemen of the highest caliber. Unlikely, but who's to say? Maybe these teenagers might surprise you. And not in a jump out from behind a door and scare you kind of surprise. The good kind of surprise. That some young people are more than capable of doing if given the chance. Maybe someone like you. Chapter 1. Fear of Things Invisible. He considered himself, above most things, as a gentleman. Not that he owned land, or that he was some kind of chivalrous knight that helped out damsels and dukes alike. Indeed, Francis Roger did not know what a damsel or a duke even was. After all, he had never had to study Earth history before today. Rather, he knew that there was a standard of conduct that young men were held to, and that his family's legacy, both the big and little L kind, meant that he would have to not only meet those standards, but exceed them. A single groggy eye opened as Francis laid on his stomach, head turned to his right side. There it was, a single black birthmark at the base of his thumb. The source of both his pride and dread accumulated into a circle less than half an inch in diameter for all the world to see. He turned his head to the left, almost instinctively, to change his train of thought, but he was unable to escape it. His left thumb also bore the birthmark, a much more daunting proposition, but he had resigned himself to his fate long ago. For the people of Nippon, family and legacy are everything, but for those who are blessed with a legacy, much was expected of them. Francis looked at his clock, hoping by some miracle that the numbers would read 3 a.m., and another round of sweet dreams was ahead of him. Rather, they seemed to mock him with the cruel omen of 6:45, and the realization that 15 minutes would never be satisfying enough to risk being late on the first day of school. Francis was considerate like that, but not out of some sense of work ethic that would be beaten into him by the military a few years later, but rather out of respect for his mother. Josephina was a stern woman. Stern is just a funny word that mommies use when they want to be mean with love. But not out of a lack of compassion for her son. She too knew the implications of an ambilegacy, and would see that such standards were not only met, but exceeded. Such was the duty of a Nippon mother. Francis pulled both arms under himself and weakly pushed in vain as a way to get out of bed. The best he could do was slouch to the right, and then gravity and the edge of his bed did the work for him. After checking his face for bruising in the mirror, Francis ran his fingers through his light brown hair and swept a handful of it from covering his green-blue eyes. He thought the same thing that every young man has ever thought on the first day of school. Could I get away with not taking a shower and not have anyone notice? The answer was no, and will always be no, but it had to be asked. Francis was never the first to be awake, so it was of little surprise that the bathroom was occupied by his mother. Rather than knock on the door and receive the "just a minute" response that he knew was coming, he decided to quickly make morning tea for his mother and himself. While originating from Earth, it had become fairly common to put dried leaves in hot water and pretend that it tasted good for many Imperial citizens lately. A way of being polite to other cultures, even if it caused you to lie ever so slightly. At least that's how Francis rationalized it to himself. Just regular non-leaf water was his preferred beverage of choice on a school morning, but he was starting high school now and needed a gross grown-up drink to symbolize it. When his mother came out of the bathroom, Francis quickly stood up and offered her a good morning bow of respect. she offered her own silent bow in response. Without any words exchanged between the two, Francis handed her the fresh cup of tea, along with a file containing the completed science homework that she had given him the day before. Still silent, he abruptly turned around and quickly hurried to the bathroom for his own shower. This had become a bit of a routine for the last few years, silence and all, as it became clear that Francis would be expected to no longer be treated as a child, but as a grown man. Children need cheery good mornings and did you sleep well or two to start off their day right, but adults like to pretend that they only need tea, work, and silent bows to accomplish the same thing. It was not true, of course, but part of being an adult is figuring that out years later when you have your own kids. Freshly showered, Francis stared intently into the bathroom mirror as he had one final decision to make. He looked down at the metal razor that sat at the sink, slightly to the left of his face wash. He had tried to use it a few times now, but always ended up looking like a first-time cat owner. Most young men do not have to learn how to shave, but rather are shown how by some prominent male figure. Francis had no such luxury. He picked it up, as if only to psych himself up for it, before quickly placing it back down. No, not today. He would be sporting a peach fuzz chin for the first day of school. With his gray and black military-style school uniform snugly in place, Francis grabbed his backpack and started out the door when a soft ahem cough caused him to stop in his tracks. Turning around, his mother reached up and softly touched Francis's shaggy hair. "He would be very proud of you. You know that, right?" Rather than respond verbally, Francis softly nodded his head. A weak smile appeared on his mother's face before Francis also smiled reflexively. "I like your peach fuzz. Very manly." While he did not appreciate it at the time, in later years, Francis would recall how much his mother's attempt at humor meant to him. He bent his head down so that it was easier for his mother to give him a kiss on the cheek before putting on his cadet cap and walking out the door. He did not feel particularly manly, but what gentleman does? Despite having grown up on the Imperial capital planet of Chigu, Francis was still always surprised to see so many pinks and purples adorn the buildings, advertisements, and banners strewn across the city. He did not mind too much, as it was better than the red he was used to seeing every day back at home. Even the high school itself was a pink brick building modeled off of architecture from Earth history, but there were red streamers strewn about representing the Royal Imperial Guards and the Navigation Corps. While the sight of them was a great comfort or pride for most students, Francis had more reservations about them, given his circumstances. And what circumstances are those? Well, aren't you nosy? Be patient. He is bound to tell someone sometime, and you have the luxury of being able to listen in. "The Thucydides Galactic Imperial Military High School welcomes freshmen," exclaimed the massive banner running across the front gate of the campus. Thucydides? What are with these crazy human names? Francis thought to himself. Not that the name mattered too much, nor did the banner's message. Francis did not feel so welcome that day, as his height gave away his Nippon lineage. The glares he got from a few of the other students was a grim reminder that, no, he was in fact not welcome most places he went. After finding out that he does not even have to compete for his choice in military corps assignment, his peers would be even less inclined to be his friend. Do you blame them? Francis didn't. A quick glance at his palm computer showed that room 431 would be his homeroom. Just my luck, he thought to himself. Up 3 flights of stairs every single morning? Despite his fairly lanky appearance, Francis was not the athletic type. But then again, who is at this age? Well, maybe you are. Good for you. Sitting down in the back of the classroom, Francis was pleasantly surprised to see an equally lanky figure standing behind the podium and writing out the usual welcome freshman greeting on his screen. While, by the look of his military rank, maybe an old Nippon military colonel would offer a more welcoming environment. As you likely have already heard, came the gruff voice of a man who sounded like he literally ate bullets for breakfast. We are welcoming the first post-cycle of integration humans into the classroom." All eyes, to include Francis's, began looking around the room. He quickly settled on a small, mousy-looking girl with short brown hair and glasses. Only a human would be hipster enough to wear fake glasses 1,000 years after everyone else stopped using them, he reasoned. What a jerk. I mean, he was right, but that was still a mean thing to say. Think. You know what I mean. As such, we'll be breaking into work groups to help better integrate our newest Imperial species into the fold. It was very uncommon for officers to still have facial hair, regardless of species, but the obviously well-worn officer sported a rather impressive mustache and pointed beard that he now began to stroke. Looking over the curriculum for the first term, it seems a much greater emphasis will be placed on Earth history. Therefore, I'll be assigning each of you a historic pre-space age nation to research and present your findings at the end of this quarter. The moans of disappointment that you would expect from such a request were not forthcoming. After all, the military cadets here were a little too disciplined for that. However, the look of discontent were plainly visible on some of the students' faces, kind of like how you looked when your teacher assigned you this book for summer reading. Clock's ticking, summer's almost over, and you're still in chapter 1. Listen for your name, country assignment, and group number. I will not repeat myself. Francis had little expectation as to which group he would end up with. Most of his classmates likely already did not like him, and he had next to no knowledge of Earth history. As long as there is at least one pretty girl, I'll be happy, he optimistically lied to himself. Rogers, Japan, Group 4. Francis immediately acknowledged the command by springing to his feet. Congratulations, Ambi-Legacy, the colonel said, without even looking up from his computer screen. You're the team leader. Francis silently nodded his head in much the same way he had become accustomed to the past few years with his mother. He quickly moved to the table marked for Group 4 and sat down. Being the first to the table, Francis used the opportunity to check out his hair on his palm computer screen. Who knows? Maybe that one pretty girl was on her way now. Blake, the Republic of Korea, Group 4. Francis turned his head to see a flash of reddish-orange break up the gray cadet's uniform of a figure moving up from their chair. Her long orange-red hair accented her fairer-than-normal skin tone. She was pretty. Pretty uninterested in a guy like Francis. Am I right, my fellow teenagers? High five. After a very slight bow, Nichol Blake sat down next to Francis, her green eyes meeting his for only a brief second. Great, Francis thought as a wave of disappointment washed over his body like an alarm clock that read 6:45. She's pretty, but a Hanguk girl. For reasons that are a little too complicated to go into right at the moment, this was not an ideal situation. Let's just say that out of all the major species that made up the Uju Empire, the Hanguk have the greatest reason to hate the Nippon people. It is nice to meet you, Francis muttered weakly. I'm Cadet Francis Rogers. I heard when Nicole Mack called your name, she responded, matter-of-factly. I am Nichol Blake. I hope we have a productive first term together. Colonel Mack? Francis inquired to himself. Glancing back at the instructor, he could see the name tape that read a fairly long and difficult string of letters that must make up his name. Despite both being Nippon people, the name did not ring any bells that he could remember. More like alphabet soup than a name, it looked like someone dropped a Scrabble game onto a birth certificate and called it a day. Mac is his chosen nomenclature. He's an old friend of my mom's. Nichole's answer was once again very quick and precise, if a bit standoffish. Francis was not one to complain, as their conversation had already gone much better than anticipated. Dinkley, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Group 4. Before Francis had the opportunity to turn around and see who the instructor called, Nichol continued. She is a teacher here as well, but in a different class. As you can imagine, nepotism is highly frowned upon in the military. Francis nodded his head like he agreed, but given his special treatment solely because of who his father was, His gesture was a little hollow, but as long as she did not know that, then Francis was in the clear. Unless it is for an ambi-legacy like you. Right, team captain? Crap. Yeah, crap is right. And she saw you were full of it. Hello, I'm Cadet Karel Dinkley. The fairly stern voice came from a familiar, mousy brown-haired human girl. May I sit down? Yes, you should, Nichol answered, while her team captain searched for the appropriate words to say, but failed. Cadet Nichol Blake. I'm Francis Rogers, and it's nice to meet you. Yeah, smooth one, Francis. He offered a hand to shake, as he learned was the Earth custom, but no hand was offered in return, as Karel sat down abruptly. We just need to wait for one more person, and then we should have a full team, Francis said, trying to quickly move on from the awkwardness of the unreturned handshake. Little did he know, he would have flashbacks to this uncomfortableness for years to come, usually at midnight when trying to fall asleep. Jones, People's Republic of China, Group 4. Francis looked over his shoulder, but no movement came. Jones. Still nothing. Okay, moving on. Colonel Mack sounded both annoyed and not surprised. Francis tried not to read into this any more than he had to, and decided to continue talking to his group. Since Karel is the human of the group, maybe we should have her tell us something about the countries we were assigned, Francis offered, trying his best to sound like a team leader. Do you know the history of every state that ever existed for your people? Came the quick, not-so-mousy reply. I guess not. Sorry. Francis felt he was making a bad first impression, and he certainly was, but he would later learn that it happens to most people. Maybe we should look up some basic information about them now and go into specifics later? While a fairly obvious solution, he was earning bonus points for quickly moving on. Before the girls had an opportunity to respond, Colonel Mack began addressing the whole class once again. Today is going to be a busy day, he said in a tone reflecting the dozens of times he had to give the same speech. First, I'm going to hand out a list of questions you'll need to answer as a group after researching your country. He began tossing out slips of translucent material used as a backing sheet for sticker-like data transfer packs. It was a common way for older teachers to put information on each student's Palm computer without knowing their personal address ID numbers. Ether slides, a method of swiping a data file and having it passed out to nearby Palm computers, had been around for a few years now, but the colonel must have been too old school to want to use it. Or that is how Francis justified it to himself. While the students began peeling the transfer packs and sticking them to their Palm computers for upload, their instructor continued his speech. Second, we'll need to head to the auditorium for a welcoming speech by Principal Hobbs. For a second, Francis could feel his body react to the principal's name, but had no idea why. Friend of Dad's, perhaps? Finally, we'll head over to the animal armory, so you can pick out a group companion that you'll be required to raise and train over the course of the term. Suddenly, his tone became a little more serious, as his eyes quickly scanned the room. You'll be the first graduating class of the newly integrated empire. Do not screw this up. At that moment, a flash of gray and yellow burst into the room. Cadet Kenny Jones, reporting for duty. He said duty, but it sounds like duty. This joke only works if you're hearing it, not reading it, okay? So you're welcome, audiobook listeners. With his characteristically late entrance, Kenny would make the final member of our unlikely group of future detectives. Well, there is one more fifth member, but you'll have to wait just a little while longer to meet SD. Unlike Kenny, he's worth the wait. Chapter 2. The Condition of Man. She considered herself, above most things, as human. A young woman, of course, but a general representative of what humanity offered the Empire. Every soldier is an ambassador, as her father would say. The sound of her alarm quickly jolted her awake with the sounds of an old folk song. She had long forgotten the name, but it was her mother's favorite. No better way to start her first day of school than with a reminder of where she came from. Jumping out of bed, She pushed the black hair from her dark brown eyes and looked towards her nightstand for her antique spectacles. No human had needed corrective eyewear for a few hundred years, but she always saw pictures of young people wearing them in old history books and felt they looked more human than some of the modern fashions she grew up with. She quickly ran to jump into the shower before her younger brother could, knowing that he would hog all the hot water. Despite living on a military installation for her whole life, only recently had they been given access to regular warm bathing water, and not quite enough for all three of them to enjoy full showers. Looking into the mirror, she saw her once long flowing hair and the much shorter bob-like cut she had begged her father for a few days prior. She had seen it on the women in her old military history book about human soldiers and thought it looked more mature. It did not. In fact, it made her look slightly like an effeminate 12-year-old boy, but these are the kinds of mistakes we all make in high school that make us stronger down the road. So more power to her. Before leaving the bathroom, she contemplated what to do with her fingernails. Her favorite color is orange, and that seemed to complement her olive complexion nicely, but she hesitated. I don't remember seeing nail polish on military photos of Imperial Army women. What if I gave them a bad impression of what humans are like? Her worries would prove to be unfounded, but the fact that she even bothered to ask herself the question at all was a very Karel thing to do. Even her appearance was part of her efforts as an ambassador to show humans in the best of light. Good morning, Karel said as she walked down the stairs and leaned in to give her father their traditional morning kiss on the cheek. Great morning now that you're here, came his usual reply. Joseph Dingley was a fairly tough-looking man, his own olive skin having long since turned into a darker leather-like appearance after years of military service on hostile worlds. Yet his great mornings somehow seemed sweeter when they come from a man that looked like he could juggle 3 bears at once while shaving with a sword. You missed a button, came a much smaller voice. It was her younger brother Mark, whose gesture of niceness was soon to take an unexpected turn. Oh, thanks, As Karel looked down at her gray military cadet uniform, she was quickly met with her brother's finger trying to poke her in the eye. Jerk! Came her traditional morning greeting as she socked him good in his right shoulder. Wow, you hit like a girl, even when you look like a boy. Dad, tell Mark to shut up. Mark, Joseph began after stifling a laugh. You know your sister has a very important day today. His voice suddenly became more solemn. It's an important day for all of us. He rose to his feet, walked over to his children, the one glaring at the other rubbing their clearly wounded shoulder. He placed one hand on each of their heads before continuing. They're not like us. We've always been seen as less than them. While the content of his words were pretty worn territory, the context had taken on different connotations that day. Karel has a chance to change all of their minds, to show them what the sons and daughters of knights, Vikings, samurais, legionaries, and immortals are capable of. Mark's smirk had shifted to a begrudged grin. Yeah, I know. I'm just joking around. I'm proud of you, sis. He returned his own soft jab at her shoulder. You better be, Karel retorted before whaling him in the right shoulder again. Joseph was not quite able to contain his laughter that time. Karel had always disliked the purples and pinks that colored most of the Chigu cityscape. Less that she thought those colors were bad, and more of how artificial it felt. Everyone wants to be red, the color of the Royal Imperial Guards and the Navigation Corps pilots who soar through the universe. But their special placement in society means that it's forbidden for most people to use them, even in decorations. They all want to be red, but settle for pink and purple as offshoots instead, Karel reasoned to herself in accidental rhyme. I'll earn that red through pure human ingenuity. She found her pace quickening as she thought about what life would be like in high school. None of her human friends could tell her, because she was the first. Well, except for people like her dad. However, things were really different then. And his horror stories of the old days would likely just give her a false impression. Today, she was going to be the best there ever was. The Thucydides Galactic Imperial Military High School welcomes freshmen, exclaimed the massive banner running across the front gate of the campus. Thucydides? What are with these Imperial names? Karel thought to herself. At least the idea of being a high school student felt tangible for the first time, seeing the words written out like that. This is where I belong. She double-checked her Palm computer, even though she already had the room number, 431, memorized. You can never be too careful, she said to herself, like a paranoid weirdo. The classroom was already half filled as Karel found herself a seat in the middle of the classroom. Slackers in the back, tryhards in the front, leaders in the middle. Karel recalled her father's words when making her choice. She was determined to only stand out for the right reasons, like her academic achievement. She would eventually learn that in high school you often do not get the opportunity to choose when or how you stand out. As you likely have already heard, came a booming voice from the instructor at the front of the classroom. Oh, now that's a soldier, Karel thought to herself. Her instructor had the mustache and beard that very much reminded her of soldiers from her history books, despite being non-human. Yeah, his voice sounded like he gargled with molten lava every morning, but that was just bonus points to our girl Karel. We are welcoming the first post-cycle of integration humans into the classroom. Crap. Everyone's going to look at me. They did. Crap. I hope I'm not turning red. She was. Karel could feel herself self-consciously pushing her glasses up, even though they weren't sliding down. As such, we'll be breaking into work groups to help better integrate our newest Imperial species into the fold. Karel could feel herself tensing up. She hadn't expected to be working with other species. How am I supposed to make humanity stand out if I have to work in teams? She thought. Looking over the curriculum for the first term, it seems a much greater emphasis will be placed on Earth history. Well, as long as it's military history, this might not be too bad, Karel reasoned to herself. Therefore, I will also be assigning each of you a historic pre-space age nation to research and present your findings at the end of this quarter. Geography. Wonderful, she sarcastically thought to herself. Geography is, in fact, wonderful, but high school students are unlikely to know this just yet. Listen for your name, country assignment, and group number. I will not repeat myself. Karel quickly looked around the room. She didn't see anyone she recognized from middle school. No one to hope for as a teammate. Dinkley, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Group 4. North Korea? Not a lot of famous warriors from them. Why couldn't I get historic Korea instead? Despite her best efforts, Karel's face gave away her displeasure. Karel stood up and began walking towards the Group 4 table, already seeing two other students, both non-humans, sitting there. Hello, I'm Cadet Karel Dinkley. May I sit down? Yes, you should. The answer came quickly from the red-headed Hanguk girl. Karel had a Hanguk friend in elementary school, but hadn't spent much time around any since then, as her father encouraged her to not have too many non-human friends. Cadet Nichol Blake. Thank goodness, Karel thought, trying not to change her expression, a name I can easily pronounce. I'm Francis Rogers, and it's nice to meet you. The other student, the disheveled Nippon boy next to her, sputtered out. Oh no, is he from some backwater planet that can't even speak basic galactic standard? Karel wondered to herself. Now, even if this were true, it'd be kind of a jerk thing to think, but Karel was always a better reader of books than rooms. The boy stuck out his arm, like he was about to hit her, so Karel quickly moved to sit down. What was that? Maybe Nippon men hit their women? What a barbarian. If Francis could read her mind, he would have cringed harder than he already was. We just need to wait for one more person, and then we should have a full team, Francis stated, like he was trying to control the situation. Jones, People's Republic of China, Group 4, sounded the class instructor. Jones sounds like a human name, Karel hoped, possibly prejudicially. Jones. Not coming, I guess. Okay, moving on. There goes that idea, Karel bemoaned to herself. Since Karel is the human of the group, Francis started, maybe we should have her tell us about the countries we were assigned. Crap. I don't know much Northeast Asian history outside of, like, their military campaigns. Karel hesitated. Do you know the history of every state that ever existed for your people? She quipped. Maybe that was a little harsh, but how many 14-year-olds do you know that can articulate themselves well? I guess not. Sorry, Francis sputtered. Maybe we should look up some basic information about them now and go into specifics later? Today is going to be a busy day, the instructor began, seemingly cutting him off. First, I'm going to hand out a list of questions you will need to answer as a group after researching your country. Karel was the first to peel off her data pack from the handout and stick it on her palm computer before instructor even finished speaking, quickly peeling off some old ones to make room. Second, we'll need to head to the auditorium for a welcoming speech by Principal Hobbs. Finally, we will head over to the animal armory so you can pick out a group companion that you'll be required to raise and train over the course of the term. Oh, that bit of news caught Karel's attention. I had no idea we could get an animal companion. I hope it's something cute, like a cat. Hey, I'm cute. I take that personally. You'll be the first graduating class of the newly integrated empire. Do not screw this up. The instructor's words hit Karel harder than Mark ever could. I won't screw it up. I promise, she thought. The sound of a slamming door quickly jolted Karel out of her hero moment. Cadet Kenny Jones, reporting for duty. Karel spun around to see the most broad-shouldered, blonde-haired, brown-eyed Zongo she had ever seen in person. Well, naturally, the last time she spent any amount of time with one, again, was back in elementary school. Still, he ticked many of the physical boxes that human women liked. If you don't know what those are, just go ask your mom. Group 4, Cadet Jones. You can ask your teammates what your assignment is, because I'm not going to repeat myself. It seemed from his tone that the instructor had some kind of history with the boy. Thankfully, Karel's physical infatuation softened as she thought about how a pretty, but unpunctual boyfriend would be more trouble than he was worth. I'm passing out your assignment files to your palm computers now. Look over the questions you'll need to answer after looking over each of your assigned countries quickly. We have to get to the auditorium for your opening ceremony. Yo! The Zongo's greeting caused Karel to jump slightly, having caught her off guard. Kenny Jones, yes, that Kenny Jones, he said to no one in particular. This is my group, right? Yes, Francis stated before being cut off by Nichol. Yes, it is. Don't be late to class or they're going to stick you in the infantry corps, Nichol snapped. Kenny leaned in towards the center of the table, lowering his voice. That's the idea, Fire Sprite. He began tapping a piece of blue ribbon hanging from his jacket collar. True blue. Karel was surprised to see light blue as a decorative piece. In the 14 years she had lived on military installations, it was never a very common color to see. Well, he leaned back away from the table, cocking his head back and sticking his hands deep into his pockets. Who's going to let me know what the assignment is? Francis started before being cut off once again. We have each been assigned a country from pre-space Earth history, Nichol said without missing a beat. Francis is Japan. Karel is the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. I'm the Republic of Korea. Oh, that's not fair, Kenny interrupted. I get everyone's name but yours. Nichol Blake, came the unenthusiastic reply. Well, I should say unamused, as Karel noticed Nichol trying to suppress a faint smile when Kenny asked. Pretty girl, pretty boy, figures, she thought to herself, like a bitter 35-year-old. Seriously, Karel, you just met these kids. Stop being so judgmental. And that makes you the People's Republic of China, Nichol finished while gesturing to Kenny to sit down. As the team leader, Francis sheepishly began, I think we should take a look at the first question together so we can be thinking about the answer while researching our countries tonight. That way we can talk about it together tomorrow. Beanpole here is our team leader, Kenny said with a slight nasal exhale. He's an ambilegacy, Nichol clarified in a matter-of-fact tone that could also be felt like a dagger into Francis's soul. Ambilegacy? Karel pondered. I remember reading about legacy stuff in 5th grade Nippon biology class, but I don't remember specifics. Yeah, no one remembers 5th grade biology class, Karel. That's why good students take notes. It doesn't matter. Let's look over the first question before we have to leave for the auditorium. The frustration in Francis's voice was quite palpable at this point. It says, why did people form nation states? They don't, Kenny chimed in. At least not anymore. That's the point, Nichol retorted. We have to explain why they did. It's a history assignment. Just read about the Treaty of Westphalia when you do your homework tonight, Karel stated. It's kind of the start of the idea of nations in Earth history. Oh, the end of a war is still in the military history wheelhouse. Okay, you go, girl. Wait a second. Is any of that true? I don't have time to fact check, so we'll just have to take her word on it for now. Time's up, came the unmistakable voice of their instructor. Get each other's palm IDs so that you can talk to each other after the opening ceremony. The very intimidatingly tall figure stood up at attention with his arms at his side and feet together. Cadets, on your feet. Almost in unison, the entire classroom scrambled up from their chairs. Karel could feel her heart jump up into her throat. This is it, she thought with a swelling of pride in her throat. I'm a human soldier now. Nothing is going to stop me. Chapter 3. The Knowledge of Consequences. She considered herself, above most things, as an artist. Even though her academic marks would reflect her path as a scientist or engineer, she always held great fondness for constructing the beautiful from the functional. Every beaker a canvas, every schematic a masterpiece. Nichol had never set an alarm for herself since the 4th grade, as her internal clock was always primed for a 5:30 a.m. early rise. No coffee after 3 p.m. and no heavy foods after 6 o'clock meant that her timing was never out of place. Even the nerves that naturally accompanied the first day of high school would not be enough to throw off her precision, not even by a single minute. The early morning routine meant that Nichol was able to avoid running into her mother and Alexander. The Blakes had come to an unfortunate stalemate in their domestic relations, so avoiding the awkwardness was probably in all parties' best interest. Well, who talks like this? What she means is that she is fighting with Mom about her new husband. Now, that was not so hard, was it? Well, maybe it was, as Nichol felt that she would rather die than use a word like husband to refer to that man who now resided in the place where her father should be, or rather in the place he once was. Nichol had a lot to deal with for someone who was also starting school so soon, but in what would be a common problem for her in the future, she felt like it was something to deal with at some later time in the future. As Nichol dried her long amber hair and stared at her green hanguk eyes in the mirror, she felt that she no longer recognized the sad demeanor staring back at her. Who is this frightful woman? She thought to herself. And what did she do with that wonderful girl I used to know? She threw her wet towel into the sink like an uncultured monster and reached into the drawer for her nail polish. She grabbed the wrong one again. The soft pink color of the unopened bottle seemed to almost blind her as she carefully placed it back into its proper place in the back of the clutter and pulled out one of the many well-used red-brown shades. You wanted an engineer. She could barely even start the thought before audibly choking back a sound of equal parts anger and sadness. She may have forgotten you, but I won't. Perhaps if her brother was still at home, she would have waited just a little bit longer in order to see him off, but Greg had left for vocational training just a few weeks prior. Nichol grabbed her bag and left from the front door, her still wet nails leaving a small stain on her shoulder strap. There would be no goodbyes that morning, as had become customary the past 16 months. However, had Nichol turned around and looked up at her mother's bedroom window from under her black and gray cadet uniform cap, she would have seen the silhouette of a woman who very much wished to have had heard a morning goodbye. Even though the pink bricks of the campus buildings were in no way an homage to the support corps, Nichol felt that it was a subtle hint from the Uju Empire that her struggles as an artist were not going unnoticed. Why, she had made the trip out to the school every day for the past 2 months in order to spend time at their study cafes. This morning she felt an unexpected but no less welcome surprise waiting for her at the front gate. The Thucydides Galactic Imperial Military High School welcomes freshmen, read the banner, along with a new nameplate that replaced the previous placeholder of New Military High School. Thucydides? Nichol pondered, with a slightly puzzled frown sneaking upon her face. What kind of name is that? Why not name it after a famous Hanguk warrior or something? Nichol walked straight to room 431, as she remembered seeing it on her registration information a month prior. She was a bit early and took a seat near the front of the class. If I have questions, I want to get them answered right away, she justified to herself for picking the least popular seats in the house. She decided to start looking over the course syllabus while the other students came walking into the classroom. She did not even notice when the instructor came in until after he started speaking. As you likely already have heard, we are welcoming the first post-cycle of integration humans into the classroom. Before even looking up, Nichol recognized the voice of Colonel Machiavelli, the friend of her mother, who sounded like cigarettes smoked a pack of him every day. As such, we will be breaking into the work groups to better help integrate our newest Imperial species into the fold. As much as Nichol disliked Nippon people in general, if one had to be her instructor, then Colonel Mac was the best choice. Looking over the curriculum for the first term, seems a much greater emphasis will be placed on Earth history. Unless it's about Leonardo da Vinci, Nichol rhetorically thought, then I don't care about Earth history. Therefore, also be assigning each of you a historic pre-space age nation to research and present your findings at the end of the quarter. Please be Italy or France, she internally begged, to no one in particular. Listen for your name, country assignment, and group number. I will not repeat myself. The wait seemed to almost kill her as she heard her favorite European states being given away to other classmates. Blake, Republic of Korea, Group 4. Asia? Nichol did not approve of the choice because she was uncultured in the finer arts like 21st century video games, K-pop, and fruit-flavored soju. As Nichol approached the table marked Group 4, her heart sank. Already seated was the unmistaken lanky brown-haired figure of a Nippon student. Swallowing her disgust, she managed a weak bow as the boy adequately fumbled a first greeting. It is nice to meet you. I'm Cadet Francis Rogers. I heard when Colonel Mac called your name. Nichol did her best to hide any malcontent in her voice. I am Nichol Blake. I hope we have a productive first term together. Mac? Francis looked confused, but of course he would not be familiar with the nickname of a teacher he had never met before. Mac is his chosen nomenclature. He's an old friend of my mom's. Francis looked like he was about to respond, but Nichol decided to cut him off with a quick clarification. She's a teacher here as well, but in a different class. As you can imagine, nepotism is highly frowned upon in the military. Her words seemed to make Francis fidgety. Nichol looked down to see the boy self-consciously rubbing the birthmarks on both of his thumbs. So, that's why he's team leader, huh? Nichol no longer quite as afraid to let her face reflect the disgust she was feeling at the moment. Unless it's for an ambi-legacy like you. Right, team captain? Francis did not respond, but his expression told Nichol all she needed to know. Hello, I'm Cadet Karel Dinkley. May I sit down? The question caught Nichol off guard, as she had been too involved in the Francis situation to have noticed the little black-haired human girl who now stood next to her. Yes, you should, Nichol said with the warmth of an Inuit's boot. Cadet Nichol Blake. I'm Francis Rogers, and it's nice to meet you. Not only a Nippon, but one that cannot even speak properly, Nichol assumed internally. Why do they get so many undeserved opportunities when it was my people they killed to be here? Since her question was heard only by herself, she was unable to get an answer, but no response from Francis could have likely remedied this situation. We just need to wait for one more person, and then we should have a full team. Please be a tall, dark, and handsome Zongo, Nichol pleaded, again to no one in particular.
Jones, People's Republic of China, Group 4.
Came Colonel Mac's unmistakable grumblings. Nothing.
Jones.
Still nothing.
Okay, moving on.
Nichol recognized the Jones surname, but could not for the life of her remember why. Since Karel is the human of the group, maybe we should have her tell us about the countries we were assigned, Francis suggested, his voice cracking, betraying the uncertainty in his statement. Do you know the history of every state that existed for your people? Came the human girl's sarcastic reply. Maybe we aren't so different, Nichol thought, chuckling to herself. I guess not, sorry. Most people would have felt at least a little bad for Francis at this point, but Nichol was not most people. Maybe we should look up some basic information about them now and go into specifics later? Nichol was not able to answer before Colonel Mac's booming bearded voice rang throughout the classroom. Yes, his voice was so manly, even it had its own beard.
Today is going to be a busy day, he started. First, I'm going to hand out a list of questions you will need to answer as a group after researching your country.
Nichol looked at the data transfer pack and carefully placed it in the same single worn spot on her Palm computer and immediately removed it once the near-instant download completed.
Second, we need to head to the auditorium for a welcoming speech by Principal Hobbs. Finally, we'll head over to the animal armory so you can pick out a group companion that you'll be required to raise and train over the course of the term.
Animal armory? I hope we get a Zeebo. What in the world is a Zeebo, Nichol? Your animal is going to be something cute, like a dog or a red panda. No 7th grader reading this wants a Zeebo as a main character.
You will be the first graduating class of the newly integrated empire. Do not screw this up.
As if on cue, the door of the classroom swung open with a loud bang and jolted the classroom's attention.
Cadet Kenny Jones reporting for duty.
Well, the speaker appeared to be the Zongo that Nichol was praying for, but dark would have to be substituted for blonde. Sorry, we are all out of tall, dark, and handsome. Would tall, blonde, and handsome be okay?
Group 4, Cadet Jones.
Colonel Mac's baritone again, snapping Nichol back to reality.
You can ask your teammates what your assignment is, because I'm not going to repeat myself. I'm passing out your assignment files to your Palm computers now. Look over the questions you'll quickly need to answer after looking over each of your assigned countries quickly. We have to get to the auditorium for your opening ceremony.
Mr. Tall, Blonde, and Handsome strutted over to the Group 4's table with the exaggerated swagger of a Zigo teen. Which makes sense because that is exactly what he was.
Yo, Kenny Jones. Yes, that Kenny Jones.
How can something so beautiful be so grating? Nichol pondered.
Welcome to high school, honey.
This is my group, right? Kenny said, seemingly ignoring the others at the table who were not Nichol. Yes, it is, Nichol snapped, knowing what game he was playing at. Don't be late to class, or they're going to stick you in the infantry corps.
That's the idea, Fire Sprite,
Kenny retorted, drawing Nichol's attention to the light blue ribbon attached to his uniform collar. True blue. Stay strong, Nichol. Do not look him in the eyes. His great big brown eyes, curses, they're like little tractor beams of dreaminess. Well, Kenny said, sitting down and finally recognizing the other two group members. Who's going to let me know what the assignment is? We've each been assigned a country from pre-space Earth history, Nichol started, trying her best not to stare too deeply in his creamy peanut butter chocolate eyes. What the heck am I even saying? Being a teenage girl is no easy task. Francis here is Japan. Karel is the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. I am the Republic of Korea, Nichol continued, trying not to seem flustered. I give her performance 7 out of 10. A C. As in, see him after class? No, wait, don't do that. That's not fair, Kenny said, pretending to be hurt. I get everyone's name but yours. Nichol Blake, she said, almost certain that her face was now as red as her hair. And that makes you the People's Republic of China. As the team leader, Francis interrupted,
I think we should take a look at the first question together so that we can be thinking about the answer while researching our countries tonight. That way we can talk about it together tomorrow? Beanpole here is our team leader, Kenny asked, gesturing with his thumb. He's an Ambe legacy, Nichol responded, knowing that Kenny would understand the reference, even if the people reading the book did not just yet. It doesn't matter. Let's look over the first question before we have to leave for the auditorium, Francis said, obviously losing patience with the situation. It says, why did people form nation states? They don't. At least not anymore, Kenny responded, having some of his hunky mystique fall from his face. That's the point, Nichol said, now contemplating if she was starting to fall for a meathead. I mean, she kind of was, but he was a cute meathead. We have to explain why they did. It's a history assignment. Just read about the Treaty of Westphalia when you do your homework tonight, Karel chimed in, finally adding something of value to the group. It is kind of the start of the idea of nations in Earth history. That's right, Nichol thought. I remember that from my Europe lectures last year. Okay, so she was right about the whole Westphalia thing. Okay, good. I don't want people thinking we were teaching their kids wrong information in this science fiction novel. Time's up, came the battle cry of Colonel Mack, who obviously did not want to have his class late to their first auditorium meeting. Get each other's palm ID so that you can talk to each other after the opening ceremony. Cadets! A quick pause and Cadence signaled that the command was soon to follow. On your feet! The auditorium was already tightly packed by the time that Class 431 arrived and scrambled to find their seats. Awkwardly pushing past already seated students, Nichol followed behind Francis and eventually took a seat near the middle left of the enormous crowd. Not everyone was seated, however, and a group of students towards the right door exit were standing and shaking hands with Principal Hobbs as he entered the room. A zongo of massive proportions, Principal Hobbs both looked like the old retired admiral that he was, but also had the muscle mass that any 14-year-old boy could only dream of having. Or 14-year-old girl, for that matter, but in a different and slightly more uncomfortable way. Go ask your mom. She'll explain it to you. Why is he touching everyone like that? Kenny asked, clearly unfamiliar with the greeting. He is shaking hands. That's how most humans greet new people, Karel yelled, trying to be heard over the thunderous sounds of students clapping in military band music. Nippons bow, Zongo's salute, humans shake. Hongo's bow as well, but ours is a little more graceful, Nichol reminded her, somewhat prejudicially. Regardless, Kenny shouted, continuing from his earlier thought, it seems really unhygienic, especially shaking hands with a bunch of high school freshmen. Maybe he wants to seem more human for their sake? Francis speculated in a voice that sounded more like a thought forming out loud than it did a fully formed statement. Well, he's not, Karel bemoaned, her distaste for the principal's gesture very clear from her intonation. We have no choice but to be in the Empire now, Karel clarified, but we still want to keep human things for ourselves. You notice how he does not wear or do anything Nippon? Kenny observed. It's because the Empire thinks of them as normal now, not special, normal. But right now, Kenny paused to point out Principal Hobbs hugging an open-armed human student in the front row. All you humans are special. As long as you're special, you'll never be normal. Francis finished the thought with a face that looked like a mixture of him being proud that he answered correctly, but also wanting to slink away to a corner and die from embarrassment when he saw Karel's reaction to his words. The students all seemed to quiet down as the principal took to the podium and cleared his throat. He was obviously a man of some advanced age, but with his zongo it would be very difficult to say how old with certainty. He opened up his bag that he had been carrying at his side and removed a large tome of a book and plopped it on the podium with a large thump that reverberated throughout the sound system. What in the world is that? Francis asked in a half-whisper. It's a book, Nichol answered in a voice that seemed to indicate that she did not plan on elaborating. Regardless, she did anyways. It was an analog way of recording written information, using tree pulp from Earth's pre-digital history. Seems like an odd thing for a retired admiral to have, Kenny said, staring at it intently as if he was trying to read it from all the way across the room. Humans still use them in decorating, Karel explained. I have a few in my own home. Maybe it's just him playing human again." At that moment, the principal cracked open the book and began his speech. "Cadets," came the powerful voice ringing across the audio system that surrounded the auditorium. "Today, you're not just students, you are pioneers, trailblazers, pathfinders on a mission to bring about a point of great change in our glorious empire." He tried to turn the page, but the thin paper began to stick to the following pages. Thinking quickly, the principal wet his index finger with his tongue and then proceeded to easily separate the pages. "Gross," Francis said, again not thinking about how many people could hear him. A quite audible shush came from behind them. "With the launch of the Thucydides Galactic Imperial Military High School," Principal Hobbs continued, finally letting everyone except those reading this know how the heck to pronounce it, "we will witness the culmination of 3 long generations of human integration into Imperial society." Nichol could see that the principal's speech was making Karel agitated, but for all she knew, human girls just had to pee more often and was trying to hold it in. "Together, we will make the universe quake at the sight of our imperial might." The principal seemed to be slowing his tempo, even as his breathing increased. Nichol was not sure why, but something seemed wrong. "Long live the Emperor! Long live the Empire!" Chapter 4. The Preservation of His Own Nature. He considered himself, above most things, as a champion, someone who was always willing to go the extra mile to win, but would always be doing so for those that could not make it themselves. Competition created a massive sense of anxiety for this young Zungo boy, not because he was afraid of losing, but because his victories would surely rob a triumph from another boy's fingers. If you are number 1, then everyone else must lose, right? Of course, this is nonsense. There are more positions than just 2, and great success can be found in the realm of averages, but try explaining that to a 14-year-old boy who just discovered philosophy. As the youngest child of 7, Kenny knew he had to wake up early in order to get in a shower and breakfast before school. Even though 5 of his siblings had already moved out, family breakfast was still a tradition that now included some spouses and cousins. As Kenny's alarm hit 5:45 a.m., he wasted no time in getting out of bed and into the shower. As he wiped the condensation from the mirror and tried to get a good look at his brown eyes peeking out from behind his blonde hair, he reached for his razor. Maybe a few months ago he could get away with only shaving twice a week, but now his beard was coming in a little more regularly. As he put on his gray and black cadet uniform, Kenny pulled the blue ribbon he had specially made from his pocket and pinned it to his lapel. "True blue," he thought to himself. It was usually a phrase uttered with a little more irony than Kenny was applying to it, but that fact would not become obvious to him for quite some time. The noise of utensils clanking against dishes, slurps of morning coffee, another dried plant and water earth drink popular among the sleep-deprived, and chattering of almost 24 mouths filled the house long before Kenny even made it down the stairs. "Well, look at you, champ," John Jones said, standing up from the table and walking over to his son. 2 firm hands landed on Kenny's shoulders as his old man shot him a smile. "Still committed to the infantry corps thing, huh?" his father asked, looking at the ribbon. "True blue, Dad," Kenny responded, again not realizing the implication of the phrase. "Whatever you say, cadet." Mr. Jones removed his right hand from his son's shoulder in order to offer a salute. Kenny snapped to attention before offering his own. "You look wonderful, honey," Samantha Jones added, trying to quickly finish her breakfast in time while still offering support for her youngest child. "I wish I could walk you to school on your first day, but—" "You have work to do, Major," Kenny cut her off jovially. "I think the Empire needs her piloting instructors more than I need my mom today, but, thank you." Mrs. Jones responded with a smile and a salute of her own. Kenny took his mother's standard officer sidearm off of the display on the side table by the foot of the stairs and handed it to her across the table. "Even instructors need to be under arms, ma'am," he said with a half-smile. With a mouthful of food, all she could offer in response was her own smile and a nod. Kenny knew he needed to leave soon before he was swarmed by well-wishers and good-luck cadet givers on his way out the door. A cup of coffee to go would have to be his breakfast today, but Kenny would not have it any other way. Because apparently he is a whack job who would pass a bacon like a gosh darn criminal. Given its connection to the lowly infantry corps, there was precious little blue to be found in the Chigu Imperial capital. The bombardment of reds, brown, oranges, pinks, and purples had become a very common occurrence to the lifelong military child, but Kenny's fondness for them had diminished greatly since childhood. Blue was his comfort color now, as scarce as it might be. Or perhaps because it was so scarce that it was like a little downtrodden badge of honor, or a sign that says, "I'm a dork, please kick me," but to each their own. Kenny had made it a bit of a habit to find a nice quiet part of the city and study away from the noisiness of home. He had made it over to the new campus a few times, but had never traveled inside for fear of the staff recognizing him as one of the Rogers boys. "Oh, what's this?" Kenny wondered to himself as something newly added caught his eye. "The Thucydides Galactic Imperial Military High School welcomes freshmen," was the greeting that found its way on top of the front gate of the school. Thucydides, Kenny thought with a look of both surprise and pleasure. Like the Greek historian. Makes sense for a human-centric facility. The name is a bit tricky, though. Thucydides. Oh, so that's how you say it. I was not even going to attempt it. I bet you feel foolish now, having read it wrong for 4 chapters. Kenny quickly glanced down at his wrist computer. "I want to be late, but only by a few minutes," he rationalized to himself. "Late enough to look like a poor student, but early enough that I do not want to miss any actual lecture information." He saw the open study cafe and decided that it was a good place to productively waste time. "I will wait until class starts and then head up to the classroom. Room 413, he thought confidently. I don't even need to check it. Well, he did, but he would not know it for at least 25 more minutes. Kenny quickly rushed out of room 413 and sprinted down the hall to room 431, making sure to stop just short of the door and slow his breathing and wipe the sweat from his forehead, so as not to make it look like he was hurrying to school. He had to keep up the slacker persona, after all. Kenny reached out with both hands and pushed open the double-swinging door simultaneously in a dramatic fashion. "Cadet Kenny Jones, reporting for duty," he exclaimed with the most obnoxious grin imaginable. Kenny was relieved to see it was someone he knew, Colonel Machiavelli, as the instructor. "Group 4, Cadet Jones," came the all-too-familiar impatient tones of Colonel Mack. "You can ask your teammates what your assignment is, because I'm not going to repeat myself. I'm passing out your assignment files to your palm computers now. Look over the assignment you'll need to answer after looking over each of your assigned countries quickly. We have to get to the auditorium for your opening ceremony." Kenny made his way to the table marked Group 4, but his grin slowly started to slip from his face. "What? Only one girl in our group?" he thought incorrectly. "At least she's hot." "Yo, Kenny Jones? Yes, that Kenny Jones," he said, making sure to give extra attention to the red-headed Hanguk girl. "My smile is my best feature. Time to turn on the charm. This is, my group, right?" "Yes, it is," the Hanguk girl snapped back. "Don't be late to class, or they're going to stick you in the infantry corps." "Ouch! A little uptight," Kenny observed, knowing now he needed to shift course if he wanted to keep things in his favor. A cute nickname that points out her best feature. I got it. "That's the idea, Fire Sprite," Kenny responded, before leaning closer to her to show off his ribbon and pecs at the same time. "True blue?" Boom goes the dynamite, he reasoned to himself when he saw her face turn slightly red. "Well, who's going to let me know what the assignment is?" "We have each been assigned a country from pre-space Earth history," the girl answered, trying to hide her slightly flustered response. "Francis here is Japan. Karel is the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. I'm the Republic of Korea." "Oh, she'd not give me her name," he thought. "Here's my chance." "That's not fair," Kenny responded in his best smooth guy voice. "I get everyone's name but yours." Boom goes the dynamite. "Again? Maybe you need an additional phrase for this situation, Kenny?" "Nicole Blake." came the girl's retort. Let's see, Kenny thought quickly. Japan and both Koreas. I guess I'd be China then if we're all in Northeast Asia. And that makes you the People's Republic of China. Boom goes the... Nope. I'm putting it into this right here and now. Just assume Kenny always thinks this and fill it in yourself. As the team leader, came the uncertain voice of the Nippon boy next to him. I think we should take a look at the first question together so that we can be thinking about the answer while researching our countries tonight. That way we can talk about it together tomorrow? Kenny pondered. That's good advice, but I have to make my dominance known to the group. Perhaps a quick observation about his least attractive feature? Beanpole here is our team leader, he said, pointing at the Nippon with his thumb. He is an Ambe legacy, Nichol clarified. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, even if it is kind of a bummer, Kenny rationalized to himself. First time seeing one that wasn't on TV or in a textbook, though. It doesn't matter, Francis spoke back up. Let's look over the first question before we leave for the auditorium. Francis looked feverishly across the file on his palm computer. It says, why did people form nation-states? They don't. At least not anymore, Kenny said, looking puzzled. In the thousands of years of Earth history, Kenny thought to himself, less than 1,000 of them even had the concept of states. That's the point, Nichol retorted with some of her wonderfully flustered complexion falling away. We have to explain why they did. It's a history assignment. Just read about the Treaty of Westphalia when you do your homework tonight. Karel spoke for the first time since Kenny sat down. Holy moly, that dude's a chick, Kenny observed, trying his very best not to let his face give away his misidentification. It is kind of the start of the idea of nations in Earth's history. She's right, Kenny reasoned internally. That would be the best place to start, even if it is European history rather than Asian. At that moment, Colonel Mack leaned upright in his desk chair before coming to his feet and cupping his hands around his mouth in order to amplify his speech. Time's up. Get each other's palm IDs so you can talk to each other after the opening ceremony. Cadets, on your feet. As Kenny stood up, he saw a single data transfer pack remaining on the table. As the other three members of the table moved towards the door, he slipped it into his pocket for later and filed behind his group. The volume of students had already reached a point that most would consider too crowded by the time Kenny's group had made their way into the auditorium. Kenny had never been one to feel claustrophobic, but the dramatic increase in noise was quite the juxtaposition from his comparably quiet middle school environment. Maybe all capital city schools are like this, he considered to himself. Why is he touching everyone like that? Kenny asked, drawing everyone's attention to Principal Hobbs greeting students across the room. He is shaking hands. That's how most humans greet new people, came the explanation from Karel, the human girl. Nippon's bow, Zongo's salute, human shake. Hanguk's bow too, Kenny corrected her, but only in his mind. Hanguk's bow as well, but ours is more graceful, Nichol added, although Kenny questioned the accuracy of her assessment. Kenny did not want to get involved in Nippon versus Hanguk quibbles. As far as he was concerned, they were all just taking what they liked from Zongo culture anyway. Regardless, Kenny blurted out, trying to get the conversation back on track, it seems really unhygienic, especially shaking hands with a bunch of high school freshmen. Maybe he wants to seem more human, for their sake, Francis said, gesturing towards the crowd of humans. Great. Now they're embracing, Kenny observed. I hope they both washed their hands and their faces beforehand. Well, he's not, Karel complained, obviously upset about the Zongo principal's human-esque actions. We have no choice but to be in the Empire now, but we would still want to keep human things for ourselves. While Kenny could empathize with her statement, he ultimately felt it was to be a poor distinction. Nothing has been fully Zongo culture for almost 1,700 years, he reasoned to himself. You will just have to accept that the cost of unity is often individuality. You notice how he does not wear or do anything Nippon? Kenny pointed out, hoping to make his thoughts clear. It's because the Empire thinks of them as normal now. Not special, normal. But right now, all you humans are special. As long as you are special, you'll never be normal, Frances uttered, not realizing until it was too late that a rhetorical question that Karel answered herself would have caused less offense. A loud thump rang out across the auditorium as Principal Hobbs placed a large leather-bound object on his podium. "What in the world is that?" Frances exclaimed, quickly forgetting about his awkwardness from a moment ago. "It's a book," Nichol stated, with her matter-of-fact tone that Kenny was unsure if it made her more attractive or more potentially annoying. Maybe a little bit of both? It was an analog way of recording written information using tree pulp from Earth's pre-digital history. "Seems like an odd thing for a retired admiral to have," Kenny mentioned, out loud, but mostly to himself. Karel quickly gave an explanation, possibly because she was finally getting comfortable speaking and had an answer worth sharing. "Humans still use them in decorating. I have a few at my own home. Maybe it's just him playing human again." Digging that deep into human history to win over a few cadets? Kenny wondered. Maybe there's more going on here than meets the eye. "Cadets," started the principal's speech, "today you're not just students. You are pioneers, trailblazers, pathfinders on a mission to bring about a point of great change in our glorious empire." "Gross," Frances yelped a little too loudly. It took Kenny a second to register it was in reference to the principal using his own saliva to turn the stuck pages. "Effective. But he was just shaking hands with 100 grubby high school freshmen," Kenny internally observed. Despite the objections from Frances, the principal continued on without skipping a beat. "With the launch of the Thucydides Galactic Imperial Military High School, we have witnessed the culmination of 3 long generations of human integration into Imperial society. Together, we'll make the universe quake at the sight of our Imperial might." Kenny noticed the principal's breathing hastening, even as his speaking became more sluggish. "Long live the Emperor! Long live the Empire!" Principal Hobbs seemed to have cut his own speech short, but Kenny was unsure why. The student body began to move to the feed as applause rang out across the auditorium. Going by the thickness of his notes scribbled into the book, it appeared Principal Hobbs had more to say, but was trying to wrap up his speech quickly. Given his age, Kenny argued to himself, Zongos don't show signs of physical deterioration until they failed the great examination, and Hobbs assuredly did not. The principal's waves and smiles were betrayed by the sudden change in his complexion. First, a cough, quick and singular in its semi-violent action. No one seemed to have noticed. Kenny leaned forward towards Karel, who flexibly jerked away. Kenny continued to clap while motioning between them with one hand for Karel to come closer. "Does he seem off to you?" Kenny half whispered, half yelled over the thunderous crowd. "All Zongos look off to me," she replied, oblivious to how hurtful that sounds. Kenny did not react to her comment and just continued with his observation. "No, I mean his skin tone and breathing. Something's not right. Maybe he's just getting old." Kenny shook his head. "We age differently than humans do. We require more calories as we age, but as long as we stay well fed, our bodies don't deteriorate like yours do until we're closer to 200 years old." Karel gave an expression that implied a, "Oh, that's right" moment that just went off in her head. Something's very wrong. Kenny could barely finish his sentence before the principal gave a second cough. Then a third. A fourth. One more, and we can officially call it a coughing fit. The applause began to subdue as the other students noticed the fit of coughing going on in front of them. A nearby teacher rushed over to assist just as the principal collapsed to the floor. Kenny quickly glanced at his classmates, who had looks of shock and confusion wash over them, all except for Frances, whose expression was more quizzical than fearful. "What are you thinking?" Kenny asked his unusually calm team leader. Frances stroked his peach fuzz for what felt like half a minute before answering. "I think we have a mystery on our hands."
Chapter 5. Not Wisdom, but Authority. He considered himself, above most things, as a good boy. That's because he was a dog, and dogs only ever hear good boy and "What do you have in your mouth? Spit it out right now." While this pupper was not the smartest genetically engineered space dog, he was at least 54% certain he was not a "what's in your mouth." It had been a week since he was moved out of the high school's biology department into the animal armory in anticipation of getting his first real assignment. While what actually entailed his assignment eluded him, he did know for a fact that good boys get treats, and gosh darn it, he was going to get himself some belly rubs if it was the last thing he did. Students had been filtering in since after lunch, but much later than had been anticipated. The scuttlebutt from the Zebos was that something had happened at the school that caused the delay, but he couldn't make head nor waggly tail out of it. He was hoping to get a team before dinner time, but the "what do you not have in your mouth" alarm in his tummy told him that it was increasingly not likely to happen. With the emphasis placed on earth animals this term, many of the more fun animals, like chimpanzees and platypuses, were long since claimed, while many breeds of dog, from bulldog to sheepdog, to maybe even some chicken dogs and horse dogs, had found a home. This poor little fellow was as unattended as a piece of bacon on the edge of a middle-aged man's plate. Just wanting to find their way into a person's heart. "Well, we can't do anything until we pick out an animal from the armory, so there's no point in doing anything else until we finish this first." The noise of a Hanguk female firmly grabbed the animal's attention. "We took too long at the study cafe looking up Earth history stuff, and now all the best animals are going to be gone," echoed the voice of a Zungo male. Our animal friend would have been hurt if he had known the implications of those words, but right now the only context he was searching for included dog and bull. "They still have a few dog breeds left," came a softer female voice, but the dog couldn't quite place her species from just her smell. "Maybe we can find a Malamute or a Husky?" All of a sudden, the face of a Nippon male appeared, as if out of nowhere, in front of the cage, almost startling the medium-sized dog. "How about this guy?" the young man asked, looking at the patchy brown, black and white fur of the animal. "It's kind of small," the Zongo male stated in a disappointed tone. "Of course it is," the unknown female voice chimed in. "It's a basset hound." She pushed the Nippon male aside in order to open up the cage. She picked up the long, droopy ears that dangled at the animal's sides. They were bird-hunting dogs, known for their sense of smell. "Well," the hound thought, "I don't think you would speak so highly of me if you knew what you smelt like right now, garlic queen." The Hanguk female bent down in order to get a better look and wrinkled her nose at the up-close look of the beast. "Kind of ugly, isn't he?" "Well, you're no prize yourself, sister." I can't even finish that joke. You are a fairly pretty lady, even if your choice in hounds is a little lacking, the dog thought to himself. "Hey, you guys wanted to start looking around for mysteries," the Zongo male called out. "And hounds are known to be great at finding clues. I say we go ahead and take them." "Oh, aren't you a sweetheart?" the dog thought to himself. "I will fetch your slippers every day and—" "Even if it is uglier than sin." "And poop in them." The dog tried to mean-mug the young man, but his sad-looking eyes only made him look more lovably pathetic. "Let's keep 'em," the Nippon male said, with all the authority of a raccoon being caught in a garbage can at 3 a.m. "I think he would make an excellent addition to our team." "Oh, I like this one," the dog thought to himself. "He's like a fish. Not the bad kind that look tasty and then bite you on the nose, but the good kind that are just tasty and already dead." The support corps officer behind the requisitions desk walked over to the group, his black and pink cap in hand, and handed Francis a palm computer. "I need a class number and a name." "Class 431, Francis Rogers." "The dog's name is Francis Rogers," the officer replied, incredulously. "No, I thought— Oh, never mind." Francis looked down at the dog's name tag. "Space Dog Specimen 648, it read. A smile slowly materialized on his face as he said with absolute confidence, "Space Dog!" A long exhale from the officer clued the students in that this was not the first time and would not be the last time that such a name graced his log. "You want to name your space dog Space Dog?" Francis nodded his head, quite pleased with himself. If he had turned around to see the faces of his teammates, he would not have been so proud. "Space dog it is," the officer said, taking the palm computer from them and placing his cap on his head. "He lives with the team leader, but all group members are responsible for his care. You hear?" While there were some protests from his fellow classmates, Francis did not hear them. He looked Space Dog in the eyes and uttered the 3 words every woman wants to hear. "Are you hungry?" "No, I'm Space Dog." As the group waited in line at the Student Union Club registration office, Francis used the opportunity to introduce the group to its newest member. I'm Francis," he said, picking Space Dog up and touching noses together. "That's Karel," came next as he turned the dog around to see the girl sitting down leaning her back on the wall. "She's a human from Earth." "So that's what that smell was," Space Dog exclaimed to himself. Turning the dog slightly to the right was another familiar face, / smell, waiting in line with them. "And this is Nichol." Yeah, and I'm Kenny," came the loud voice right beside them. "And I'm not calling you Space Dog. It makes me look like some kind of mental patient running around calling that out." Kenny looked the basset hound up and down before exclaiming, "I know. I'll call you SD." "For super deformed?" Space Dog worried to himself. "You know, for Space Dog, but cooler." "Oh, that makes a lot more sense than super deformed." "We need to hurry up and do our homework so we can go back home," Karel said, slightly banging the back of her head in the wall behind her. "The stuff we were studying in the cafe earlier about the states." Francis carefully put SD down with a little head pat for good measure. "First, we have to register a school club," he stated, pointing at the front desk they were slowly approaching. "Every cadet has a curfew and can't associate after school hours unless they have an officially registered club." "He's right," Nichol stated, bending down to hand SD something from her pocket. "I've lived here all my life. They don't mess around with enforcing curfew." SD sniffed at the object in Nichole's hand before accepting the crumbly bread-like peace offering. "There shall be no more war between our people," SD thought, licking the snack from her hand. "Ew, gross dog drool," Nichol squealed, pulling her hand back. "Our people have never known such dishonor, and we will hunt you down to the ends of the universe." Nichol pulled one more from her pocket and dropped it in Esty's mouth. "May the blessings of 1,000 harvests grace your kin, madam." "If we want to get to the bottom of this mystery," Francis started to say, as his expression became his more somber usual self, "then we need to be able to work together between classes." "Who even said there was a mystery?" Karel whined, clearly showing her displeasure at the situation. Kenny stepped out of the line of students to join Karel by the wall. "I'm with Francis on this one," he said, leaning over to lock gazes with her. "Trust me, I'm a Zongo, and that's just not how we react to old age. Heck, he wasn't even old enough to have gone through the next great examination." Karel turned her eyes away from his and stood up in order to brush some of the dust off the back of her uniform. "We covered that in school briefly. You guys have to pass a test every 20 years in order to not die, right?" "Not exactly," Kenny started to explain, but for some reason not obvious to the group, he stopped short of giving an actual answer. "They age extremely slowly," Nichol stepped in. "But every year they grow older, it requires more and more calories in order to maintain their youthful strength. At some point, they realized not everyone was worth the strain on their resources, and so developed an examination to weed out the less productive members of their society." "And kill them off?" Karel exclaimed with a very accusatory look on her face. "No," Francis started, after covering SD's ears. "They just stop giving them the food they need to maintain their strength, and they just lose it over time until they pass. It's a different process than what you humans go through." "Doesn't make it any better," Karel muttered, slumping back down into her seated wall-leaning position. "I suppose so." Kenny seemed lost in thought again, like he was physically looking in the distance for what he wanted to say, but couldn't find the answer. "Either way, a club is how we can spend more time together outside of school legally," Francis stated, picking up SD and moving up in the line. "Who says I even want to spend time with a lot of you outside of school?" Karel muttered under her breath. She thought no one could hear her, but SD hears all. He sees all. He smells all. Well, this mostly pertained to food dropped on the floor, but his skill set was ever increasing. Now at the front of the line, Frances was greeted by an officer whose facial expression betrayed the fact that she was supposed to be home a few hours ago. Class number, group number, and club purpose, she inquired without looking up from her palm computer. With a big smile plastered across his face, Francis took a deep breath and answered, Class 431, Group 4, Mystery Club. That makes it sound like we're studying mysteries, not trying to solve them, Nichol interjected. We should be a detective club. We can do both. There won't be things to detect every day, Kenny argued. I don't care. Just hurry up, Karel cried, continuing her light head-banging motion. That's it, Francis exclaimed proudly. The Thucydides, Galactic, Imperial, Mystery, High School, Detective, and Mystery Club. You know, the club registration also includes the name of your assigned animal assistant, right? The officer clarified, again typing away without looking at the students. What's its name? Space Dog? Francis answered, expecting to be scolded for not picking a real name. Little did they know that this officer had been working with high schoolers for 2 decades, and just today already registered a cat named Meow Zedong and a chicken named Pol Pot Pie, so nothing fazed her at this point. Congratulations, Class 431, Group 4, she began, finally looking up from her palm computer. The Thucydides, Galactic, Imperial, Mystery, High School, Detective, and Mystery Club, with a space dog, it is. As the door to the clubroom swung open, letting in just enough light to confirm the dirt shielding was still on the table and chairs, the group made their way in, fumbling to find a light sensor. Something must have tripped it, as the blinding overhead lamp flickered on and almost blinded those unfortunate enough to be looking up. SD was not among them, as he already found himself a nice, comfortable spot on a chair in the corner of the room and began taking up residence there. Looks like everything is nice and haunted, Karel bemoaned. Can we go home now? Literally every other class has already gone back home. Not until we just go over what we want to write for our group project, Francis replied, looking around the room for anything to write on or with. Nichol took out her palm computer and swiped over to their homework assignment. Why do we have states? Not why did we have states? Kenny inquired, half joking and half not wanting to misunderstand the assignment and have it affect his grade. Remember, we are specific Earth countries for this assignment, Karel clarified, somewhat condescendingly. We need to answer from their perspective, so, why did Japan have a state? Francis thought about the question seriously. His people had moved from states to planets to federations a long time ago, but at some time they had something similar. What makes people willing to give up some of their individualism and personal freedom to a higher organization like that? He wondered. Thinking back to his morning tea with his mother, he realized that he was doing something he didn't really want to do, but did so out of trust of his mother and fear of the alternative. People are generally afraid, he began, still trying to figure out his point as he spoke, and that fear drives them to want to find others to help them feel safer and work together. Without looking down, he already knew he was subconsciously rubbing the birthmarks on his fingers again. States were a way of collecting similar people together that they trusted to feel more secure, because in the end, people do what they must because they're afraid of failing. Being with others means you have a better chance to succeed. You have to dig deeper than that, Karel objected. If people were getting what they needed from their village, then there would be no reason for change after all. She thought back to her father's stories about how beautiful Earth was, and how most of it had been taken and used as materials for the Empire. Powerful people want more resources, and states were a more effective way of getting lots of people you could force into getting resources for you. The Empire is just a more modern version of that. She felt her face getting hot. Anger? Embarrassment? Regardless, she finished her thoughts. States are more efficient than villages for taking and controlling more for your empire. Nichol did not seem convinced. That's too broad of a generalization. If it really was just about resources, villages would just have traded more. The act of war and conquering others is wasteful if resources are your ultimate goal. She looked down at her slightly chipped, red-brown nails and thought back to her morning internal conflict. At some point, people were just families, and later those became villages and then cities, right? People change over time, and what they think is normal changes too. She thought back to the day she asked for that unopened pink nail polish, and how happy it made her at one point in what felt like the distant past. Maybe states were just what people had slowly thought of as a new normal, until something different came along to change their minds. What people learned to accept because they couldn't change their fate and tried to make the best of it. I think all of you are partially right, Kenny butted in. Fear drives people to give up freedoms and come together into states. He thought about his family, their drive, their ambition, their success. It happened because they wanted to succeed above all else, even at the cost of other Zongos. Because they want power. Resources are just one shallow way of thinking about it. People want to survive and not die, so they compete and fight. States are just a large group of people working together to fight and survive. States are just people trying to not die. He said the word die much softer than he expected himself to. He wondered if the others picked up on his verbal slip-up. Maybe it was not normal at one point, but by that point in Earth's history, every leader knew they needed something like a state in order to gain enough power to keep their culture alive. The room briefly fell silent as the group reflected on their different interpretations. How were they supposed to write their assignment? Group projects already are the worst, but how about when no one can agree on what to even focus on? Before anyone could speak up, SD chimed in by letting out a large basset hound-sized fart. Thanks for your contribution, Karel snarked, holding her nose as best she could. We have enough space in the file to write down all of our thoughts, Nichol explained, feverishly typing away at her palm computer. Let's just do that and then meet together tomorrow after class to start our detective work. Everyone agreed. It was far too late at night to be debating any further, and they knew that the tensions in the room were not going to be alleviated with more disagreements. With all four members confirming palm addresses and giving their salutations, Francis scooped up the already napping SD in his arms and headed for the door. Maybe states come together just like we did, pal, Francis whispered to SD. Everyone for a different reason, but the same purpose. With another sleep fart that told Francis he needed to get this dog on a better diet as soon as possible, Francis stopped at the doorframe and looked back into the room that would be their detective headquarters for the next 4 years of their lives. It could use an air freshener,